So picture this. You're 3 weeks into your new job and your manager gives you a task, and maybe they ask you something that doesn't quite make sense to you. So you're asking, why are we doing it this way? And suddenly the energy just shifts. Maybe your manager pauses a little too long, or their tone changes, or maybe they just say it's because that's how we've always done it. And it makes it really clear that the conversation is over. And you're new in your job and you're thinking, I'm just trying to understand. It feels like I just started a fight. And here's the thing, for a lot of you who are Gen Z, you're asking why in order to learn. You're trying to get context. But for many managers, that why can sound like you don't trust them or their judgment, or you're telling them that they're doing things in the wrong way. So we're going to talk about one of the untold rules that really nobody explains. There's a hierarchy to questioning decisions at work. That's something that's really important to understand. And we're going to talk about how both sides can navigate that without feeling disrespected. Welcome to Handled by the Why Variable. I'm Yaa-Hemaa. Happy to see you here. And if it's your first time, I hope you really enjoy the lessons that are coming today. Each week, we talk about some of the untold rules of the workplace, and you're going to come away with some actionable strategy that you can actually use in your workplace. So let's dissect this a little bit, because it's not really about the word why so much, but it's about how each generation is hearing that word, how they're interpreting it. So most of the time when someone who's early in their career, maybe Gen Z, they're asking why, the intention is to get context, to understand the bigger picture. But managers oftentimes are hearing something different. They're feeling like that person is suggesting that what they're offering is a waste of time. And look, neither interpretation is crazy, but everyone is interpreting this based on their own position, where it is that they come from. So a lot of managers, if you've been in your career for a while, you earned the right to question things in the workplace. You proved yourself first, you built trust, and then you could push back on decisions. But if you were questioning things too early, it was like you were undermining authority or you weren't being a team player. Meanwhile, for a lot of you who are Gen Z or early in your career, you grew up in classrooms where the point was to actually ask that why. Collaboration was the default. Questioning was how you showed that you were engaged. And look, a lot of the tools you've grown up with, Google, YouTube, Reddit, all of that stuff, it's built around the idea that you can and should question everything until it makes sense to you. So we have two different approaches that are colliding essentially, and both sides can feel like they're being disrespected. It's just a different viewpoint as to what that why means. And the reality is, it's not just asking why, it's how you ask. The problem is that most people don't realize there's a difference between seeking clarity and sounding like you're challenging someone. So we'll do two versions of the same question. So version one, you go, why would we do it that way? That doesn't make any sense. And then there's version two. Could you share the thinking behind this approach? I just want to make sure I understand that I'm aligned with you. It's the same core question, but completely different energy. The first one, it actually feels really combative. That's how it's landing. So you're making the manager feel defensive. It's like you've already decided that the approach is wrong and they have to somehow justify their position. Whereas the second one, it signals that you're trying to work with them, understand their thinking. They don't have to jump through hoops to respond to you. Look, asking how is important, but what's key is the way in which you do it. So let's talk about ways in which you can ask that why, that question, without accidentally starting a conflict. And so you want to prevent that pushback, obviously. So first, just pause for a second. This is something we could all do on a number of fronts. Before you respond, just take a beat. If you're feeling defensive or confused, that might come through in your tone. And so just pausing for a second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds can help you to regulate a bit. Then state your purpose. And this is really important because it shows your intention. And you can say, look, I want to deliver what you're expecting. I'm just asking because I want to understand the full context. When you name your intention, you're taking the guesswork out. Your manager doesn't end up viewing you as being difficult because you've already told them what it is that you're seeking. You're trying to align with them. And then you can ask a clear question. You don't have to ask a million of them. It can just be, well, what about this? Or have we can maybe considered this? You can ask, what's the key outcome that we're hoping here? What would success look like going through this approach? And you can also offer a path forward. So you're not just questioning things, but you're trying to move the work forward. You can ask, okay, if this is a priority for Friday, should I focus on A, B, and C versus the other areas that maybe you've been working on? Does that work for you? So it's showing that you respect their decision, you're curious about the context, and you want to get their work done. You want to be accountable. You're showing that you're a collaborator. And so, of course, managers, you have a side to this too. Because when someone is new and they're asking their why, it might feel to you like they're second guessing you, or like they don't trust you or your judgment, or like you're going to be end up, wasting time because you're already behind and someone's questioning you, you've got lots of work to do. But the reality is most of the time, it really is a genuine question about context. And they're not trying to undermine you. They just don't have the full picture yet. So here's a really quick way that you could respond. So recognize that you're seeing and understanding that they have a very simple intention. You can show appreciation for the fact that they're asking, that they're trying to be helpful. And you can give them a rationale. It can be really simple. We're doing things this way because Friday's the launch date and we have a really important client and we need to respect that relationship. Or maybe there's a particular risk and so things need to be done in a particular way. That whole conversation can take 30 seconds. And what it does, it gives them the why without making it feel like you're defending yourself. You're just leading. You're giving them context, understanding, so that they can do their job well. And let's be real too for a second, because this is something that not everyone talks about. Because sometimes someone asks you that why question and you realize you don't actually have a great answer. Maybe it's just how your team has always done things. Maybe it's a process that made sense years ago, but nobody has questioned it since. Maybe it's just the status quo and it stayed that way because it's worked well enough. And then you have a young employee and they're asking you, but why do we do it this way? And you're standing there thinking, well, we've always done it this way. And that can be uncomfortable because it's not always a bad thing or a bad question for them to ask. In fact, sometimes it's the exact question that needed to be asked. Because you've always done it this way isn't a real reason. And if you can't articulate why something matters, maybe it doesn't matter as much as you think. Or maybe it does matter, but that reasoning or that rationale has gotten lost. And now we need to look back, okay, what's the real reason we're doing things in this way? So if you genuinely don't know, you might want to say, you know what? Look, that's a fair question. Let me think about this. Maybe we've always done things in this way, but maybe it doesn't still hold. Why don't you give me some time to think about this? And this might feel revolutionary, but the reason why it works is because you're being intellectually honest. You're showing your team, look, I don't always have all the answers, but you're also showing leadership by not shutting them down. When people feel like their questions matter, they're going to continue to ask better questions. And those questions might actually improve how your team works. Now, does this mean that every Gen Z employee who asks why is a genius, challenging outdated systems? Of course not. And sometimes, they don't have the context and they don't understand why some things, maybe they seem arbitrary. But the point is, if their question makes you pause and think, you know what, I'm not sure why we've always done it this way, then maybe it's worth examining. Not everything needs to change, obviously, but things don't have to stay the same just because you've always done it in that way. And, well, I don't think I can have this conversation without talking about another side of this. And it would be a disservice if I pretended that every time someone asks why, it's coming from a place of genuine curiosity. It's not always, because sometimes people are belligerent and they like to challenge and, it's disguised as a question, but really they do feel entitled and they think that they're better than you. And the way that they ask their why and the intention is actually kind of rude. So how do we tell the difference? Look, genuine curiosity, it sounds like, can you help me understand the reasoning? What's the outcome that we want here? I want to understand what you're thinking. But if someone is entitled and is pushing back, they might be, it's their tone of voice, it's the words that they're using. Why would we do it that way? That makes no sense. Or when I was at my last job, we did it better. Or I don't understand why we're doing it. Why can't we just do it my way? You can hear the difference. One way of questioning is asking to learn. The other is telling you they've already decided you're wrong. And if you're getting that second version, especially if it's a pattern, then it's really important to have that conversation. You can say, look, I'm hearing this as a challenge, not a question. If you're genuinely asking for context, I'm happy to provide it. But if you're disagreeing with the approach, let's have that conversation. Let's have a direct conversation. That's clear and that's fair, and it gives you a chance to recalibrate the relationship. Because if they are entitled or disrespectful, then it's not just a communication issue. They need to learn as well how to disagree professionally. Maybe they haven't been taught how to do that. And so part of your job as a manager is to teach them. You're not going to tolerate negative behavior that undermines your team, but you also can't just leave that behavior alone as well. Most of the time, I really don't think that Gen Z is trying to be disrespectful. They just don't know the unwritten rules yet. They don't realize sometimes that tone matters as much as content. They haven't learned that at work, you have to build credibility before you can challenge systems. That's different from someone who's genuinely trying to be difficult. And you as a manager, you have to be able to tell the difference and respond accordingly. I would say most of the time, be generous, but obviously don't be a doormat. Just respond calmly and clearly. Okay, so for those of you who are early in your career, let's flip this, because if we're being honest about managers needing to call out entitled behavior, we also need to be honest about you. You need to recognize if you're doing it. If you find yourself asking why and getting defensive responses a lot, you need to ask yourself, am I actually asking in order to learn, or am I trying to be argumentative? Am I framing this as, is my tone curious, or have I already decided that they're wrong? Have I earned enough credibility in that environment to challenge this first? Do I need to build some trust? Do I need a little bit more time under my belt? What we're talking about here is a level of self-awareness, and this is key to your success in the workplace. Sometimes the most professional thing that you can do is recognize, you know what, I don't have enough context yet maybe to weigh in on this. Let me do it their way and see what I learn. And look, it's not being a pushover. That might be, you might push back on me even saying that, but it's showing that you're being strategic. Obviously, there are going to be times when you absolutely should push back, even if you're new. If there's a routine clarification that you need in order to understand and to do your work well, obviously ask the question. Or maybe there's a trade-off and, the timeline is really tight. There are a lot of conflicts. And so you need to have that conversation. And maybe you push back politely. Look, in order for me to meet this deadline on Friday, I have this other file I'm going to have to drop. Can you help me to determine what's a priority? So you're not saying no, but you're showing, look, I have a constraint here and I need some guidance. And obviously, a red light situation, if there's ethics or safety or a legal risk, you have every right to question that. This is when you should speak up, even if it's uncomfortable. Maybe it's violating a policy. If it's a red light, it's not optional. You need to either have that conversation or escalate it respectfully. But look, that red line situation is pretty rare. Most of the time, if you just have a genuine conversation, respectful conversation, you'll be just fine. So if you're early in your career, don't just fire off that why in a Slack message or a text thread, because that can read as being a bit combative. It can be vague. And it kind of puts the burden in some ways on the other person to guess what it is that you're actually asking. You don't want to put your manager in a position where they just say, look, because I said so, this is the way we're doing things. That can shut down conversation and, it's not good for your relationship. But if you say, look, I'm asking to understand, not to challenge, can you help me to understand what the outcome is here? In that case, your manager is probably going to be really happy to explain the why, to give you more context. And that why question, asked politely, respectfully, with that genuine attitude, is going to help you to understand your workplace culture as well. Asking why isn't disrespectful, but how you ask it, it matters so much. So remember, pause, talk about your purpose, ask a clear question, maybe offer a path forward. And if you're managing people, really genuinely listen to what it is that they're saying. And overall, look, there's a hierarchy to questioning decisions at work. And for all of us, we need to remember there's a hierarchy in the workplace. Decisions are made by people in more senior positions, managers, leadership. That's one of the untold rules that maybe we don't always talk about. And I say this not to weaponize that leadership hierarchy or to silence you. It's about understanding how to navigate your workplace in a way that people feel respected, that you feel respected too, and we get the work done. It's important to be able to navigate this tension. I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the ways in which you've asked these why questions in the workplace and that's brought you some success? Subscribe, hit me up in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. This is Handled by the Why Variable. I hope you found this helpful and useful. I look forward to seeing you next week.